Hey guys, welcome to this tutorial on how to colorize a black and white photo. For this example, I've just decided to go with this picture here. I figured this was kind of a cool picture, and plus I like all the old components and computers here. I thought that that would be fun to color. So yeah, we're gonna go with this, and the website that I found this on is New Old Stock. So you can search New Old Stock. Put photos in there as well. Then you'll go to the top option here. It's nos.twnsnd.co, and you can just scroll through and look for a black and white photo that you would like to colorize. Obviously, you don't have to go through this website. You could just search old black and white photos, but I always kind of like a website that's giving me options instead of stuff that I would just dream up myself. I kind of like to see several options thrown at me. So anyway, this is a cool website. You can check it out. And first thing I'm going to do, any of these photos, just make sure that if you have an option to zoom in, that you will do that. So you click, and if it still looks a little fuzzy or grainy, give it a second to load. That way we get the sharpest version of the photo. Now I'm going to right click, copy the image, and open up Photoshop. Now once this opens, as usual, it should copy the size of the photo that I just copied. So I'll go to New. And that looks about right. But first thing I want to do is make sure that I switch this to either 200 or 300. I mean, usually if it's between 1 to 2,000, I do 200. If it's lower than that, I'll go to 300. But yeah, so we set this up. Everything else looks good. We'll click Create. And then we'll paste, Control V. And now we have our photo. So we don't want to necessarily color directly onto this photo. So I'm just going to call this the photo layer, and we'll lock it. Create a brand new layer up on top. And as the title of this assignment suggests, we are going to be using blending modes and colors. Now, we may not have a perfect reference for skin tones, so you want to make sure that you go back and find a picture of a person's skin tone. So you could just, I don't know, you could search people. Make it really simple. Go in here, and again, the photo doesn't necessarily matter as much. What we're looking for are the colors that we want to take. So any pictures where things are very washed out or very bright aren't necessarily going to help us out too much. Another good search is portrait, because then we know that we'll get faces, and usually they have a good range of color for the skin and light. So that's also another good thing you could do. And this actually seems to have a good range of skin here, so copy this image as our reference, and I'm going to paste it in here. Don't need it to take up the whole photo. And all I'm going to need from this is just the brightest tone, mid-tone, darks, all of that, and we're going to make a quick palette so that we can just use this on the fly. So get your brush tool, right click, and right now I have some digital brushes active, but all you guys are going to need is the soft round and hard round. So I'm going to grab a hard round and make sure that it's set to normal. Opacity is going to be up at 100. Flow is going to be up at 100. And for now, just to make things easier, make sure smoothing is turned down to 0. So first thing I'm going to do is select the highlight. So I'm going to go to the brightest spot of the skin. Now with my brush tool still held, I can hold Alt on my keyboard, which gets the eyedropper tool, and I can click, and now I can just paint that color that I had. So that's our highlight. Now I'm going to get the darkest color. That's going to be right here underneath the chin, just practically all in shadow. Let's go for kind of a mid-tone. So something maybe around, actually that's still kind of bright, but that's all right. Can put it underneath the highlight. Go a little bit darker than that still over here on the cheek. And you'll see there's a little variety here. Like some spots of the skin have more yellow, others have more pink, some browns. I mean, it should be kind of a mix. That means that you're doing things right. And even while you're sampling, you can see here it's comparing, while I'm holding the mouse down, it's comparing to the last color that I already sampled. So that can also be a good guide that you're going steadily darker. I think this will probably be the last one. I could snag one down here. Yeah. Okay. So now I have all the colors that I need. I'm just going to grab the rectangular marquee tool, or just think of it as like a square selection tool, and draw a square through these. And now I'm going to hit Control-Shift-I, and that's going to inverse the selection, and just hit delete and deselect, Control-D. Now I have this whole spectrum here, and I can just call this layer Skin Ref. Now underneath that, but still above the photo, I'm going to create a new blank layer called Skin. And I'm going to change it to color. So all of these different options here are the blending modes. We've used these a couple times here and there, but they're definitely necessary for this assignment. So make sure that you have the right layer selected, and then you change this to color. Now all you're going to do is go back to your brush and make sure that you have the soft round brush now, and you're going to carefully draw around the areas that you think match up. So remember, darkest area would be your darkest color, light would be your lightest, and you're going to touch it up as you go. So I'll hold Alt to sample the color that I want, and then I'm going to paint it on an area. And with the soft round brush, you always have to be aware, you have to be careful, because you're going to be going off the sides a little bit. So you might want a hard round brush, or maybe even drop the hardness just about to 50% or so. That way, if you do go over the edge, you can shrink the brush down and erase that stuff. And also do pay attention, make sure that the flow and the opacity are at 100% on the eraser as you do this. But yeah, now I'll go back to my brush. I know that this is the lightest area, so I'll just color this in carefully. And notice that I'm not going over those transition areas as much, because I can hold Alt, click on this color, and use that in the slightly darker area. So a lot of this is just being careful that you are paying attention to the values that you're working in. And when I say values, I'm just talking about the lighting, the shadow, and try to sort of color match based on the light. If it starts to get a little bit brighter in an area, you can always hold Alt and switch back to the brighter. Go over one spot or two, then Alt, click, and get the other color back and start rolling over that. So you'll carefully do this. I'm just going to speed this up really quick so you can see how it all looks by the time I finish the face. All right. Now, I still have a lot more to do on the skin. I mean, as you can see, I still have his arm to do. I even have this person sitting in the background. So I could keep my skin and my skin ref layer together for later if I want to move on. And also, got a little sloppy here, just remember to go through and make sure you don't have any of these sort of fuzzy edges around here. You want to make sure that you go slow and steady. I also suggest doing a couple clicks at a time, just because if you're doing a really long hold on your mouse and you're going along this edge, and then suddenly you make a small mistake and you want to Control Z to step back, well, you just lost that entire thing. So I always just go in small clicks, small little strokes here. That way, if I make a mistake, it's just one small step back instead of several. Or sorry, it's one small step instead of making this huge line and then it having it disappear. So when you are ready to do another color, I would suggest that you click Skin, hold Shift, and then click on Skin Ref. That way both of these get selected. And then hit Control G or this folder icon. Now we can call this group Skin. And when we're ready to go back to it, or if we need to go back to it, you can just open it and everything's right there. So I can hide the ref for now. And when I'm ready, I can open up another layer here and just call this whatever the next thing will be. So in my case, hair. And as you go on other objects, you don't necessarily have to worry about getting exact tones, just because skin can be a little challenging to nail down correctly. It's good to get reference, but if you're looking for something just like a hair color or the color of a vest or anything like that, you have a lot more freedom to just choose how you would like that color to look on your own. But like in this case, I'm just going to go with a little sample of this color here and make sure that I change the blending mode back to color. And then you'll see it goes across. Now, the big thing here is that I'm going to blend this color over the top of the skin. So I want to make sure that I have that soft brush kind of going along these edges. And that's why I was painting skin color, because in my particular case, this guy has pretty short hair. Like, we should be able to see his skin through the hair in a lot of different points of his head. So I'll just do the same thing. Make sure I clean up that edge. And that's another part down. And you just want to be careful. What is going on with my hand tool here? There we go. Okay. And especially with things that are fuzzy like this, you just want to be careful. You might have to do a little back and forth and really touch it up carefully. And the nice thing about zooming in like this is that it might look a little touchy to you, but when you zoom out, it looks pretty good. Just don't forget the other aspects of like whatever layer that you're working on. So in my case, if I'm still on hair, I want to make sure that I also get eyebrows or beards or just anything else that's going to be sharing that same color. And always zoom out, Control 0, just to check what that looks like. So far it's coming along. Now you can imagine you would just do the same process for the rest of our figure here. You could choose a color for the vest, and even though it looks like a black vest, I would still suggest creating a new layer. Let's go over here, call it vest, and choosing something that's still a color that's darker. So maybe somewhere in between blue and purple, and then I get sort of a mid-tone to dark purplish color. Change the blending mode to color. And then you can go through and add that in. And if it doesn't look quite right to you, that's all right. You can always go back and switch the color. This is where you have a little bit more freedom to just choose what you think looks good. And see, that almost blends in too much, so I'm going to have a little more color. There we go. I think that's kind of a happy medium for me. So this is really what a lot of this assignment will be. So I want you to find an image that has something like this, that has a lot going on in it, so that you have a good opportunity to go through and color. And when you are ready, there are touch-ups that you can do. So say if something looks a little bit off to you on the skin tone and you want to go back and add some different shading, Well, you can. You can just create a new blank layer above the skin, call it shading, and then change this layer to multiply. All you'll do is grab your brush, hold Alt, select the tone of where you want to add shading to, and now if you go over the top, you'll see it really bumps up the shading. I can make this guy look like a zombie if I want, but that's why you want to maybe choose even just more of a mid-tone, and then, oops, switch the blending mode off. There we go, multiply. See, even with a mid-tone like this, it still goes very dark. So that's why you could also go brighter and still get just a slight touch-up in certain spots. But I do want to challenge you to be detail-oriented, okay? So even if something like the lips, because right now it looks just almost like a little gray, maybe what you do is go a little bit more red and compare the color next to your old one. Maybe what you do here, and I can just switch this to color. I can go through and add more of that pinkish hue for his lips. And not every topic that you choose has to be a person, but just make sure it's something black and white, and go through and color all the different pieces of it until you have something where you can group all of your colors together. So same trick I did before. You'll click the top layer, shift click on the bottom just before your photo, hit Control G or the folder, and you can just call this colors when you're finished. That way when I turn it off, you can see everything that you've changed and what you've done. And that's basically it, guys. You're going to be using blending modes to add colors into your different images, whatever you choose, and colorize every single aspect of that photo. And use your layers to your advantage. Don't just do all of the colors on a single layer, because if you want to make any adjustments or erase it, if it's on its own layer, then you aren't erasing the older colors that you've already finished. So think of it that way. When you've finished a section of color, move on to a new layer every single time. That way it's easier for you to fix. I can't wait to see what you guys make. Good luck.